Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist Podcast. It's Jesse Green here with another episode of the show for you today. Now, we all understand the value of communication. We see patients all day, every day. We work with team members all day, every day. We have our own family members that we go home to every day as well. So the art of communicating effectively and well is a very important skill. And I say the word skill very deliberately because the ability to communicate effectively doesn't come as installed software at birth. It's a skill that we need to learn, a skill that we need to master. And with the right tools and the right systems, we can all up our communication game. Now, my guest today is Katherine Eitel, and she's from LionSpeak.net, and she's a wonderful guest. She's incredibly generous and warm and giving, and she shared so much wisdom on our podcast today about courageous conversations, setting vision. And I'm going to encourage you to make sure you listen to the entire episode because towards the end of the conversation, she shares an incredible metaphor about being in the river where things are flowing well and then being out in the mud. And this conversation, or this part of the conversation, I think is going to be incredibly valuable for you. I know that as I was listening to her explain this metaphor, I was thinking about my own communication styles when I've come from the communication in a resourceful state versus times when I've tried to communicate in a less resourceful state and the difference it makes. And so Katherine shares some incredibly good thoughts and insights around how to do that so well and so elegantly. So lots of goodies in this conversation, really practical, really insightful, and really thoughtful or thought-provoking conversations that Katherine had. And I just want to say thank you to Katherine because this, for me, was a really fun interview to record, a really great conversation with a kindred spirit. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So here's Katherine. Katherine, thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us here at the Savvy Dentist Podcast. How are you today?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
And you're coming to us all the way from Southern California. You're coming out of summer, going into, I think you call it fall, we call it autumn. So yes. The seasons are changing.
Yes, but it's still fairly warm here. So no coolness in the air just yet. So still full blast summer.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. So where I am, obviously, it's the other side of the seasonal spectrum. And we're coming out of winter and into spring. And we've still got no sign of warmth where I'm sitting at the moment. We're still in full-blown winter. It's sunny outside, but it's cold as. So now, you've got a really interesting background. You're incredibly well-known for the communication work that you do, for the leadership work that you do. You're helping people create bold and vivid visions for their life and for their practice, but not just creating it, but helping them implement it and turn it into reality. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of that conversation, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background because typically when we go through high school or university and all the rest of it, I certainly didn't anticipate I'd end up in this place. And I imagine for you, it's not been necessarily a linear process either. So how did you wind up in this line of work?
Yes, it is exactly the way you described. It was sort of a winding road. I actually started as a chairside dental assistant in college, never expecting it all that it would be a full-time career. But as fate would have it, I filled in for a teammate that was sick up front. So I began to learn the administrative part of a practice. And then after college, I took a job as a manager of a very successful, growing, expanding practice. And so really got a sense of how to run the business and manage it from that level. And then my career took me into consulting and training. So for several decades, I was a full practice management coach. And about 10 years ago, I decided to narrow, talking about vision, seeing the future a little differently and wanting more of certain things and less of others. And so really narrowing our focus to communication skills coaching only. And we like to describe the company now as this overarching umbrella of communication skills coaching, but really in 3 different lanes or sectors, if you will. So one is patient-facing or customer-facing communications, a lot of telephone skills training. We have a pretty robust mystery shopper call program, case presentation, financial discussions, things like that. And then our second sector is what we're going to be talking about today. So we describe it as team-facing communications. So anything from the owner of the business articulating their vision to the team, but also team-to-team communications and manager to team. And so we do a lot of team culture work, team retreats, things like that. And then our third lane is described as audience-facing. So that's train the speaker and a train the trainer program as well. So that's sort of the short version of how I got to this spot.
Wow. Well, there's lots of really good golden threads in there that we can unpack and gently pull on, because I think out of pulling on those threads, in my experience, comes with lots of insight, because you've done this for so long. You've experienced life in the practice. You've experienced life as a consultant. You've experienced life from all different manner of different facets. Mm-hmm. And there's that rich tapestry that goes with being there and doing it. Before we do get into that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, I guess, the communication with the team, because from a lot of practice owners, if you ask them to describe the 3 big headaches in their business, it often comes back to money, time, and team. And people often say that they quite like the idea of scaling up their business and growing their business, but that comes with complexity, and that complexity often is around managing a bigger team. Yeah. And then some people go, I just don't know if I want to do that, the management of the team part. And the tendency is to shrink back to what they know rather than grow into what they can be.
Sure.
I wondered if you'd seen those sorts of challenges in your work, and is it a common thing? And how did you help people through that?
It is common. And I'll tell you why I think that's so. Most of us did not learn how to manage challenging conversations, or what we call a courageous conversation with someone, where we need them to do something different, to stop doing something or start doing something or start thinking a little differently. And so we didn't take a class in it in school, most of us. And I'm married to a recently retired middle school teacher. And he said, the first time he heard my lecture on courageous conversations for leaders, he said, man, I wish my middle schoolers would have to take a mandatory class in this, because I think we'd launch a different workforce in a few years if they did. So we didn't take a class, and many of us weren't provided with a good example of it in our family setting. So it's not surprising that we've inherited a workforce that doesn't have any skills at having these kinds of conversations, either laterally or up to a boss or down to a subordinate. They don't know how to do it, and we tend to do it really poorly. So no wonder we pull back from it. Anything that we do repeatedly and we're not successful at it, we tend to retreat from it. Of course we would. So we are sort of on a mission at LionSpeak, at my company LionSpeak. We're on a mission to convince owners, managers, and even team workers at every level that these skills are not only learnable, they're easier than they think, it's quicker than they think, and way more successful than they might imagine to learn these skills. But whether we think we should or not, we need to provide this kind of coaching for people. We need to assume they don't have it and be committed to, because our lives get easier when we do. And I just heard some statistics that were pretty shocking, that while this could seem like a soft skill, like why should I have to teach people how to communicate? Shouldn't they come to work knowing that, Yeah. And I get that. I totally get it. And who has the time for it, that kind of thing. But I think it has more of an effect on the bottom line and some pretty hard numbers than people might expect. Well, one of the statistics we recently heard was that 40% of most managers' time is spent solving issues that other people should be able to solve for themselves.
Yeah.
40%. Imagine if you could get that back from every team leader that you have. The other statistic we heard is that every employee on average is spending about 2.5 hours a week thinking about conflict or actively embroiled in it, which adds up to about 2 weeks a year of lost productivity. 2 weeks a year for every employee is lost where they could be focused on practice goals or their particular role within the practice, but they're not. They're thinking about conflict or they're actively involved in it. And so imagine what your bottom line would look like if you could get 2 weeks of productivity per employee and 40% of your manager's time back. It's something worth thinking about. It really is.
It really is. And you've actually touched on something that is a word or a phrase that I hear used around communication. And I'm going to tell you, it slightly sticks in my craw when I hear people talk about communication skills as soft skills.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just me being pedantic or getting into semantics a little bit, but when I hear the word soft skills, it almost diminishes the value of those skills. And I think they're vitally important skills. And to your point, we haven't learned that at school, and it's not factory installed software that comes with us at birth. And so there is a skill set to be learned. And I think that you're right when you hear those statistics. Maybe it's not how to cut a crown, or maybe it's not how to do a root canal, or all those clinical skills which might be considered hard skills. But managing people, whether it's the patient, whether it's team members, that's life. That's an important life skill right there.
It is.
And yet we're calling it soft.
Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important. And I've seen the results. I've seen the results in my own life and in my own business. And I've seen in building a culture where the expectation is that people will step up to a mature level of communication, that they will bring those skills to meetings. They will bring those skills to small conflicts that are bound to crop up when you have people working together. Mm-hmm. The expectation in my company is that we are mature adults and we will not brush things under the rug. We will bring issues to the forefront and we will handle those in a mature way. But it's up to me as a leader to make sure my team is equipped with the skills to do that. And I think we have to assume that most people did not learn it at home and did not learn it at school. And so I think if you just accept that if we could quickly teach them and put them into a process that they could count on, we're sort of known as the unscripted communications coaching company, because I've been at the team level and been handed a book of scripts. And I remember opening it up and thinking, these are the hokiest things I ever read. I can't imagine saying this myself. And so I think the truth is that scripts gave us consistency. It definitely, if people follow them, then we get consistency of message, we get consistency of brand. But it's often at the expense of authenticity and connectivity. And so I'm just the kind of girl that says, why do I have to choose? How can I have both consistency of message and authenticity and connectivity? And we teach, almost everything we teach is through a framework. So we have a framework where we ask people to commit to that framework, and they're held accountable to that framework, whether that's on, a new patient call on the telephone, or whether it's this kind of courageous conversations conflict model. But we give them a really simple framework. And then we say within the framework, they get to be who they are. If they're funny, they get to be funny. If they're, tender and kind, and that's their nature, we want them to show up fully authentic within that framework. And we teasingly say, if they're direct, we just ask them to be careful. but
yeah.
But they get to be who they are. And so I find that we get more compliance, higher levels of compliance, because the teams don't feel like we've handed them every single word, but we have handed them a framework within which they can feel safe and secure and feel like they're in control of a conversation, but they get to be who they are. So,
yeah, it's a really good point. I think we're going to be singing from the same hymn sheet on this one for sure, because frameworks really provide a great structure, but they give you the flexibility to freestyle within that structure and to be you. And I think it's a really good thing. And I remember years ago, someone giving me the book of scripts as well. And I was actually pretty good at following the script, and so I could do that. But unfortunately, the patient didn't know that they were meant to follow the script as well.
Exactly.
And so you go, hang on, this you're not meant to say this, you're meant to say that, and I can then respond appropriately, and then the whole thing got derailed. But I do think that you're absolutely right that the framework and the structure carries the conversation and carry you through, while giving you the opportunity to be you and not to feel like I've got to be you or you've got to be me and all that goes with that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about courageous conversations for a moment, because with any conversation, as you say, there'll be a framework. And then for those types of conversations, there's usually preparation that goes into that conversation before you kind of shoot from the hip and off you go. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the combination of structure and preparation as it relates to the successful outcome of a conversation.
Yeah, when we teach the framework, we teach actually two. The whole conversation is an internal conversation first and an external conversation second.
Yep.
So I often say, I could give you the framework. I could give you the framework right now, super simple. But if you used it from a weak emotional platform, it wouldn't work. Yep. And you would be tempted to blame the framework. When you use it from a very strong emotional platform, it works almost every time. And so it's absolutely, we call it mindset and skill set. You've got to handle mindset. It often feels like it's those people out there, but I have found that our best efforts can be stalled when you're communicating from a leadership position, whatever your title. It's an inside out job. You can't lead someone to a place you've not been. So, and I would suggest that there isn't sometimes a lot of time for preparation. There is if you're taking the conversation to someone. But if someone is marching down the hallway at you in the middle of your workday, shaking their finger at you, saying, I want to talk to you today before we're done, because if that girl's here tomorrow, I won't be. Here you go. Here you have a courageous conversation opportunity standing in front of you with no time to prepare. And that's why I think having a quick little self-scan that we teach, where you can quickly control the emotion that will be triggered. You can quickly get yourself on a stable footing, and then you can speak from that and have a framework for the conversation, is a huge advantage to someone who does not know how to do that.
And I think you're right. The skill set and the mindset is a really, really important thing, and being able to have those conversations, from a position of resourcefulness, responding rather than reacting, all of the things that go to great conversations. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the role of culture in the business and creating the space for those conversations, because we can equip people with the skills, we can equip people with the scans, but equally as the practice owner, we often set the tone for the practice, and we've got to be able to create that culture by intent. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about creating the culture that allows or encourages courageous conversations, because I know that there's a lot of people who'll be listening to this episode and going, man, she is on the money, Katherine, she's nailed it, bang, 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 bang. And when they go back to their practice, they might come unstuck because the environment doesn't support it. So can we just speak about creating the environment that supports courageous conversations as well, please?
100%. So the best example I can give of this is my own company. There are things that I hold in high regard or that I know will make my experience of owning this company and working within this company much better. And for example, I don't do well with people. My company's not set up in a way to have people who can't think for themselves, who can't make some decisions, that are pretty self-sufficient, that are self-starters, because we're spread all over the country. We're not physically in the same office. So I have a set of values, if you will, and we split our values into two parts. One we call cultural values. So those are sort of internal values for me, like what are the sort of rules for how we are going to play together and work together as a team. So those become our cultural values versus our brand values, which are sort of the things that we hold important in terms of our promises to our customers and to the public. And so you alluded to it in your preface there, that you have a culture at all times. You have a culture in your family, you have a culture in your community, you have a culture in your practice. And the question really is it a culture that you've purposefully cultivated, or is it on accident? And often the ones on accident, not always, but a lot of times, they don't serve the owner's vision for what they want to accomplish. And therefore, there is this feeling of irritation and disappointment. And, I think people know what we're thinking about them, whether we actually verbalize it or not. And so that's sort of under the wire. And so I just didn't want that. I wanted to create a space where people felt safe to bring up things that were in their way. They never did not know the expectations about how they would behave or how they would show up at a meeting or how they would communicate with one another or with our clients. And so I know that's up to me. It's up to me. It's my company. It's up to me to clarify and continue to clarify what the values are that will create. I believe that's what drives the culture, the values that we keep alive through our example and through our courageous conversations. It's all tied together. And really, I look at it like a web. So at the very top of or maybe a pyramid is a great, it's like at the top of it is this idea of me clarifying first for myself and then to my people what it is I want to create, what it is I want LionSpeak to be, and what it is I want it to offer, and what kind of place I want it to be to work within. And that's up to me. And then once I've set that in motion, then from there, we have some quarterly leadership meetings where our leadership team meets to ascertain if we're on track for that vision. Then from there, we have some monthly meetings that include a few more people. Then, that comes down to some what we call growth conferences, which are everyone's on a different schedule for those, but everyone, part of my value proposition in the culture. And when people are interviewed, we show them that the culture here, based on my values, is that everyone is on a growth trajectory at all times. And that we want everyone to be very clear what their next step of growth is. And so if that's not interesting to you, if that's not something that you would enjoy, this might not be a good fit. And so we're really upfront with that. So it's no surprise to anyone that we are constantly having growth conferences, and that some people have them every month and some people have them every quarter and others might have it once a year. It all depends on the trajectory they're on, but that all people who work here, including me, could tell you in a moment's notice what we're working on right now and we're held accountable to. And so that's, I think, a good example of having values that drive a culture from the owner's perspective, and that those morph over time. Things that weren't important to me 20 years ago, some have become more important to me now. And things that were important to me then have been less so now. So I think thinking that we're going to set a vision and a set of values one time in the life of our work and call it good is really not very practical.
It's really funny that you say that. I've been having that exact conversation quite a lot recently about what was important once before is no longer, and vice versa. What wasn't important before now is. It's really interesting. And just to go off on a small little tangent for a moment, listeners to our podcast will know I turned 50 this year, and 0 birthdays are those moments of introspection, for me at least anyway. But what I'm noticing as I kind of step outside of myself is the changes within myself, and going, that used to be so important to me. Now I just don't care. And it's a really weird out of body experience. So thank you for sharing that, because now I realize that I'm not the only one that has that, and I don't feel quite as crazy as I would do.
And I'm more bold. I know that part of it is age. I actually had my 60th last year. So I know for some part of it is maturing, but I'm less apologetic. I feel less of a need to justify wanting what I want and how I want it and where I want to go and what I want to create. And that confidence I've found has been well received by my people and the clients that we work with that have that same level of confidence, not arrogance and not in a demand way, but just in a very confident that this isn't going to be working for LionSpeak isn't going to be for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's just as it should be. But for those that share the same values and get excited about the same future, this is going to be a perfect fit. And when you know that, then you can really hold your line and actually create what you put down on paper, those are two very different things.
Yes, indeed. And I'll talk about that in a second, but just on your point there is a really important difference between confidence and arrogance. And, confidence and being able to be emotionally assertive and to hold that space doesn't equate to arrogance. It just means I'm now more confident and certain about what I want, and I'm
just certain. That's right. That's the great word. Yeah.
Just happy to say it. So love that. I wanted to talk a little bit about vision because we've touched on it. We've spoken a bit about values. And to me, values and vision are very close cousins with one another. And one of the challenges that in the past, I've gone through these exercises. We'd go away to somewhere really inspirational. We'd get out our vision board or we'd, do all the things that people do, and we'd craft this really magnificent sounding vision statement, only for it to be laminated, stuck on the wall. And I'd walk past it for the first few days. It was feeling very enthusiastic and engaged with it. But then kind of life happened, things happened, and almost that sticker on the wall or that poster on the wall almost turned into the white paint of the wall and it became invisible. I wanted to ask you a little bit about why is it that we kind of all get caught up with this big, bold vision for our lives only for it to just fade into the background? Why is it not sticking? Are we creating it incorrectly in the first place? Are we hoping for too much from our vision? Are we just not really convinced or buying into the vision? What's the disconnect?
Well, I completely agree that the tendency in the past has been to go away for a day or a half a day. And I even remember times where the direction was to gather your whole team and the whole team to be involved in the writing of it. And they'd struggle and, futz around with it. And then they'd finally come up with this beautiful, poetically sounding thing, verse, and it would go in a frame on the wall, or sometimes it would go on the website. But when you're writing something to go on the wall that for a patient to see, or you're writing something to go on your website, that's a marketing effort. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about a marketing effort. No. And if pieces of the vision made the wall or made the website, that would be great. But I don't write it with that intention. I write it, and I actually believe that old way of doing it caused people to say that's where they said, this is just a soft skill. This is like a fluffy thing to do that feels good in the moment, but really doesn't change anything at the ground level. And most business owners don't want to take a half a day of productive time or a full day of productive time, certainly, and then have it not make a difference at the ground level. Right? Yeah. So the way we approach it, and it's not the only way, but it has worked so well for our company and for our clients. And that is that it is not a one-time event, number one. Mm. Number two, it is nobody's to write except for one person. And that is the person who owns the business, or the people who own the business. Yeah. I do not want any employee of mine to have any say in where I want to take my company, where I want, with the things I want to develop. I'm on the line for the risk. I'm on the line for the business. And part of the gift that I get back is that I can do it any way I want. I can start any time of the day. I can end any time. I can mark any days off of my calendar. I can produce any kind of product. All of that is up to me. And that's the it's my prerogative and it's my responsibility to, I think, as an owner, to clarify, number one, for myself, and then secondly, for my people, where we're going and what we're building and what we're all committed to doing. I do think the team has a big role in helping us achieve it. I mean, they have a huge role in helping us achieve it. But for me, the key word around making vision work is alignment. And that is the piece we're striving for, is clarity of vision, so much so that an employee could understand it with such detail that they could make a good decision about whether they align with it or not. And so we don't just do it once. Every single year, every 12 months, I should say, we come together, and it's my job to restate the vision. What is the same? What has changed? I mean, COVID, we had a model before COVID that we felt we were doing fantastic and everyone was on track for the vision. And then COVID hit and really sort of yanked the rug. I mean, I had just presented my vision in January and COVID hit in March last year. Yeah. And so my team had just heard the retooled vision for 2020, and then bam, March hit. And so I had to come back in April and say, okay, let's look at I want them to hear from me again how I see us thriving in this new environment. And so we did. And I think that's an owner's prerogative and responsibility.
As you were saying that a few minutes ago, I get to be the one that sets the vision for the business because I'm the owner, and it's not vision by consensus. I was almost tempted to kind of bring out an amen as you were saying that, because really honestly, because I think in today's world, it's not uncommon for there to be this movement of empowering your team, which I totally understand and support. But there are some things as a business owner that are ours and ours alone, and vision is one of those. And vision by consensus means that no one's going to buy into it. And very candidly and very honestly, for my business, I don't want to hand that over to anyone else. I don't want to be, I'm, like you said, I'm the one on the line. I'm the one that takes the risk. I'm the one that does that. I'm pretty damn certain I know where I want to go with that.
That's right.
And I don't want to have to suddenly say I'm on the line for the risk, but now because everyone wants to go over here, that's what everyone else wants to do. So I think, to your point, I think it's really, really incredible. And that becomes, as you say, a really important tool when you're hiring people. Are they going to be able to align to that vision? Are they going to buy into it? And that, I think, is going to create fulfillment for the business owner as well, because
100%.
We can make money, we can have time, we can do that thing, but fulfillment is that vision piece and fulfilling that. So thank you for saying that. And your people, they really do crave clarity from you. I've had employees come up to me and say, I'm happy to do whatever they want, but what do they want? Yes.
What do they want? I mean, it's like your children. I don't mean to downplay the value of employees. I'm not suggesting they're children. I'm just saying that it's, when we lead children from a parental point of view, that's a leadership position, the same as it is to run a company. And as our children want clarity from us and do better when they get it, I think so do teams, and they crave it. And so I want to make a distinction that I think is super valuable, because if an owner steps up with no justification and no apology for the vision they want to create, it can seem as though then what we're saying is all of our team members have to do it our way, and they have to go marching in the direction of our dreams. They have to. And I think if we could get the words have to out of our vocabulary, we'd be a much better society.
100%.
I want to say to my team, my role today is to make clear where I'm going, and I'm going. Whether any of you are with me or not, this is, at least for today, this is how I see it. This is where I'm going. This is what I want to create. Now, I don't have all the answers about how we're going to do it. I have some ideas. I'm very interested in your ideas. But the first step is for me to clarify what the destination looks like and why that's important to me. Then I want to invite you to ask whatever questions you need to ask to determine if you still want a seat on this bus, if this still feels good to you. Because the whole idea is that wherever your career is going and wherever your life is going, the most beautiful partnerships will be when my business vision and your life vision align. Align. And I want you to know that there is no judgment from me if it doesn't. If it doesn't align, I will do whatever I have in my power to help you transition to a place where you align better or more perfectly. So this is not going to be a good fit for all of you. This is not going to be a good fit. And I'm 100% comfortable with that. And I support you in that decision. I will answer any questions you have so that you can then make the right decision for you. And just know that if you raise your hand and say, you're going to be on this bus, or you're going to stay on this bus, or you're going to get on or whatever, the expectations will be high. And if it's a good alignment, you're going to love it. You're going to love the high expectations. You're going to love it. If the alignment is not good, you're going to hate every minute of it. And we're going to be back at this conversation in a different way. And so I'm real clear up front that this is an invitation into where I'm going. And it is It is as okay to say you're not on board as it is to say you're fully on board. The only wrong answer is I'm on board, but I'm only saying that because I don't want to look for another job. It's not really a good alignment. And what happens is that fleshes itself out pretty quickly when you're clear about the expectations and you get people into that growth mode, and then it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly. So
yeah, I think that's a really good distinction, because it's not about being dictatorial.
No, not at all.
It comes back to what we spoke about earlier. It's about confidence and certainty without the arrogance. And I think that's the distinction that you're really trying to make. And I really like the way you frame that as the invitation. This is where we're going. I'm going to invite you to join me. And if it's a great fit, it'll be a fun and rewarding journey. Yeah. But if it's not, that's okay too. And different people have different stages and seasons of their life and their journey. And it's okay if people step off. It's totally okay.
I'll give you a couple of examples of this. A client who in the States, we have dental insurance, right? And so for a long time, they accepted all of these different plans and reduced fee structures and things like that. And he decided when we were working with him that he no longer wanted to participate in those plans. But he had 2 people on his team whose full-time job was to research these plans and these benefits and to be able to discuss them with patients. And they loved insurance coding and medical and dental coding, and they just loved it. Well, when he decided to become insurance independent, those skills were no longer needed. And so I helped him we coached him to present this vision to the team. And I was there to kind of guide the conversation. But, it can't come from me. It can't come from the coach. It's got to come from the owner. So we had coached him. He did a beautiful job. Matter of fact, he stood up and said, I want to apologize, actually. As I start, I want to start with an apology. And that is that I've actually not come clean with myself about what I really want to create in the past. And I've done that recently. And likewise with all of you, I've not been as clear. What I have been is irritated. And I know you felt it, and it was unfair. It was unfair. I was taking all of this home to my family. It was also unfair to them. And I have decided as of today that I'm going to step into a whole new way of leading and a whole new level of leadership. And I just want you to know that I'm sorry for that, and that I'm excited about a more transparent, more honest future. And I'm going to lay it out today. And then I'm going to invite you all to, decide whether it's going to be, the new direction is going to be a good fit for you. And I just want you to know that I promise that if it isn't, I will write whatever letters I need to write. I'll make whatever calls I can make to make sure that we get you transitioned, because I care about all of you, and whether you work here or you don't. And so he laid out the plan. And I mean, most of them were excited, but these 2 gals were, they looked like somebody had hit them upside the head with a piece of wood, and after he was done, when we asked for questions, and one of them said, what will I do? What will my job be now if we don't have this this work. And he said, well, we won't have that work, but we'll have lots of other. Now we have to market to people either to stay beyond their insurance or to, to come here if they don't have it. He said, so we have a lot of work. It's just going to be different work. So if you're interested in learning new skills and stepping into the new skills that we need, I would love for you to be a part of that. And if you're not, then, and he said, you don't have to give me an answer today, but he gave him like a week or 2 weeks or something. And he said, but at that time, we will have to make a decision because I've already decided. I'm going here, right or wrong, good or bad, I'm going. And so, that was the conversation. So it's a good example of when you get clear what you want, you're also more clear what you don't want. And what is unnecessary. And it can create these conversations where we don't have to be arrogant. We don't have to be my way or the highway, but we can say, I'm not going to apologize or justify. I'm just, for whatever reason, this is what's interesting to me and where I want to go, what I want to build. And it was fantastic.
I think that's fantastic. And again, coming back to your point where the vision starts with the practice owner or the business owner, and it's their responsibility, but it's also their prerogative. And I think in a desire to be what some people perceive as the leader and to enroll people, I think they subjugate their vision to others sometimes. And I think that creates a diluted vision that certainly doesn't serve the business owner, but it doesn't serve the team either. And when the business owner is not buying into the vision, the team aren't buying into the vision, I think you erode that culture that we spoke about, and all
that's
of a
where
sudden,
it grows from always.
Yeah, and so I think that clarity piece is so important, and I really appreciate the fact that you've articulated very, very clearly that is the responsibility and the prerogative of the business owner, and it's an invitation for those people to join or not. And as you say, the only wrong answer is to say yes, but not really wholeheartedly say yes.
And then don't worry, because it will show itself. And as long as you're not afraid of the courageous conversations and you're having that web of meetings that's fleshing it out, it will show itself, and then you'll just deal with it then, and I think that's a good place to be. I've had people, Jesse, have said to me, I don't know what my vision is. Like, I can't get a clear picture in my mind. I'm struggling to know what happens if you don't know what your vision is. And so I say to them, don't trip up on the word. Like, do you know what do you like? What do you like? Like, when you see it on the schedule, you love that work. You love crown and bridge. You love implants. You love ortho. You love, what do you not like? People will say, I hate endo, or I hate extractions, or I hate working on kids, or whatever it is. And I say, well, then the vision is nothing more than I want more of this and less of this. How do I create a business that has more of these kinds of clients, this kind of work, this kind of reputation? How do I create a business that has more of that and less of this? If you can, we all know what we like and don't like, what we prefer and don't prefer. And it's very different. It's very different for each person. And that's the beauty of it, is that we get to create it any way we want. And we don't even have to justify it to ourselves why we like it. We just do, or we don't. And if you just let go of that and just say, I don't know why, I just don't like that, or I love this, and I want more of this. How do we build a practice that funnels more of these kinds of days, these kinds of cases, this kind of patient? And that's where your team and coaches and those kinds of resources can absolutely help you with ideas about how to create it, but they can't contribute those resources until you know what you want to build.
Yeah. Look, and I think you're absolutely spot on, and being able to communicate that to yourself and to be, knowing what you like, knowing what you don't like, and again, making no apologies for that, getting that bit of clarity yourself. When you lie in bed at night and you're thinking about your day, I really enjoyed seeing this patient or that, or I didn't enjoy this. I think you're absolutely right. I do agree that we have a risk of overcomplicating some things when we're thinking about vision. And I guess that's perhaps why when we see other corporate visions written that sound very grandiose, we're thinking we've got to come up with this grandiose thing. And I suspect that might be, going back to the earlier conversation, is why we come unstuck in a way. And as you say, keeping it as simple as what we like and what we don't like, or more of this, less of that, is a really good starting point. So I appreciate that. Katherine, you've got a lot of resources, and I know you do a lot of work in the dental community, and I know you've got some events coming up in November around telephone skills and courageous conversations in January 2022. If people wanted to find out more about your resources and enroll in those courses, where would they go to get those details?
Well, I would say visit our website for sure, which is LionSpeak.net. Also, you can just shoot us an email and we'll get you on our list where we have announcements for those virtual workshops. And hopefully someday we'll get back to in-person workshops. But for now, they're virtual and still really super. They're live. So, everyone's interacting with each other and we're teaching those live. But yeah, our email is info@lionspeak.net. That would be a great way. I've been writing for, I think now it's 16 years, a weekly blog called the Monday Morning Stretch. So every week I write about what we're learning, what we're using effectively or not. And we just share tips and thoughts about leadership and communication and culture. A lot of it is coming from life lessons, as I shared with you before we started today. We just came back from a cabin we have up near Tahoe with the big fires. And so this week I wrote about it. I wrote about how do we manage our communications and leaderships and really just perspectives in crisis, when we're up against some sad news or frightening news. And so just that might be a great way for people if they want to get connected with the weekly blog. And then always on those, we are promoting the upcoming workshops and things in there. So that would be a great way.
Well, I've had the opportunity to have a look at some of those articles and they're really good. So for anyone listening, go and check them out because there's a treasure trove of goodies there and lots of good stuff. Katherine, you have been incredibly generous with your thoughts, knowledge, wisdom, and experience today. And firstly, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I wanted to ask one last question, if I can, before we wrap up, because I think this is just to put a human touch to this. And using your cabin in Tahoe as an example, fires, et cetera, there's a lot of the last 18 months have probably tested people in ways that they may never have been tested before. And sometimes I've heard lots of people say that great leaders thrive under pressure and it's when the leaders stand up and so on. And I absolutely believe there's some truth in that. But I also believe that leaders are human and have their own frailties and failings and humanness. Like I certainly have my own frailties and failings and personality flaws and all the rest of it. I wanted to just talk a little bit about perhaps kindness and understanding to round out our conversation today, because one of the things that I know is when people are under stress and pressure, and coming back to that corridor conversation you mentioned earlier, coming from a resourceful state rather than a depleted state.
Yeah.
If people are feeling depleted, there's at least a risk that they may not be at their best. Can we just talk a little bit about kindness and understanding in amongst all of this, please, just to round out our conversation?
Absolutely. Well, I think, if we don't, the first person we have to be kind to is us.
Yeah.
Right. And then again, we can't give away something we don't know how to do for ourselves. And so one of the most important things I think of being a leader in any situation is the example we set. I talk a lot about the reasons why getting good at these courageous conversations is good for you, but it's a gift to us. Right? All of these conversations are a gift to us, but they're also a gift to the people we're having the conversations with to show them that there is a better way. I mean, if there's ever been a time in our history where people have struggled, I can't think of a time that we've struggled more with the ability to have conversations where we have different perspectives or different beliefs or different views in a way that is respectful and kind and allows for some curiosity and some understanding. We seem to be really, really struggling with that right now. And I think that's probably the biggest driving force for, I'm writing a book on courageous conversations right now, and it's mainly for professionals, but my hope is that it will also improve dinner table conversations and the conversations between neighbors and colleagues and, everywhere where this comes up. I think one little tip about what you're speaking to that has been most helpful for me personally is a metaphor that I use. It's really a metaphor for getting your own emotions under control and putting yourself in a position to succeed at communicating, even if you're stressed or worried or fearful. And that is this idea of, if you imagine there's a river running through the room you're sitting in right now, there's a beautiful river and it's a beautiful temperature and a great current. And you could just float in there like a cork. It's just super wonderful. And that river in my life represents all the things I want. In that river is all the money I want to make, all the relationships I want to have, all of the health I want to have, all of the impact and significance I want to have, all of that. And so I ask people in my audiences sometimes, like when you're in those moments where things are going well, what kinds of feelings do you have? And so people will say things like, I feel content, or I feel courageous, or I feel generous, all of these positive emotions. And then I say, well, now imagine that on the side of that are some muddy banks. And when you step onto the muddy banks, you can still move, but not as fluidly as in the river. It's sluggish, it's harder. So that represents the opposite, right? The times in our life where we open the checkbook and there's not enough money to pay the bills, or we do have worries about our health or the health of our loved ones, or our business isn't going as well. And so we're in these muddy banks. So I ask people, give me some adjectives for how you feel here. And they'll say the opposite. They'll say, I feel scared. I feel stuck. I feel, frustrated or angry or sad or whatever those negative emotions are. And I say to them, so would you agree that if we have the conversations we want to have from the mud, where we are in fear and we are in frustration and we are in anger, that no matter what framework we use, those conversations will go differently than if we first could recognize we were in the mud, somehow could get ourselves either in or closer to that flow, and then we had the conversation, that it would be different. And the entire audience will shake their heads and say, of course. And I'll say, then that's actually the work. The work is, I start almost every day. I have a little routine and I start every day in that flow, in that river. But then I go out into my world, as we all do, and I am thrown pretty quickly. I mean, just turn on the news. You'll be thrown quickly into the mud. So the game for me, I've made it a game. I go out into my day every day and I say, let me just be hyper aware and have my awareness happen quicker when I get in the mud, and have me get back into the flow as quickly as possible, knowing that in another hour I'll get triggered again and thrown back into the mud. And so this sort of mindfulness around how am I feeling? And if I have any of those negative emotions, I'm in the mud. It's not what I think, it's what I feel. That's the barometer. And so if you can gain some mindfulness around your emotion and just not beat yourself up, just say, oh, I'm definitely in the mud. Let me just, before I respond, let me take a step or two to the center, get a little more into that flow, and let me speak from there. Let me speak from where I'm not afraid. Let me speak from where I'm less frustrated. Let me speak from the platform of where things are generally working out for me, one way or the other. I'll have a different conversation from there. And I think that's where we can access the kindness. That's where we can access the patience. That's where we can access the faith that we need to be good business owners, good stewards of our teams and our cultures that we're creating. And I love, it's become a fun game because life's going to kick us out. It's going to kick us out in the mud. And I think great leaders, it's not that they don't get in the mud. They do. They just recognize it quicker and they just have the tools to get back in the flow pretty quick.
Wow.
Yeah.
And thank you for that, because I think, while people are going through all the things that they're going through,
Sure.
It's easy, as you say, to get into them, but it's also probably even nicer to even say, maybe that person had that conversation with me while they were in the mud and didn't recognize it at the same time as well. and just kind of perhaps finding some grace around that, perhaps.
It is so true. I tell people all the time, I've ruined you for life when you know that metaphor, because now you're going to go out in the world and you're going to see a lot of muddy people. They won't know they're in the mud, but they will be. You'll know it.
Yeah. Katherine, we've covered a lot of territory today, and thank you so much for rounding out our conversation around
it was so fun.
The topic of kindness. Again, ladies and gents, please do head across to lionspeak.net, grab all of those resources, read the blogs, sign up for the newsletter, do all that sort of stuff, because I know that there's some really wonderful resources there that will help you in your practice, help you in your life. Again, Katherine, thank you so much. You've been a really wonderful and generous guest.
Oh, I've enjoyed every minute of it. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jessie Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessiegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist.